Well, welcome again to the Financial MD show. We are so honored to have back in the co-host seat Dr. Trevor Smith after some time getting busy, doing some things. Trevor had a ton of stuff going on, and we continued to try to get some content out, but always left his co-host seat open here. So, Trevor, super glad to have you back and sitting in and chatting and making this. I mean, you're the reason that people listen to the Financial MD show. So it's our listenership has been dropping drastically, and we're so glad to have you back.
That's hilarious. Appreciate that ego boost. That's
Yep,
good.
yep. What's going on, man? How you been? What have you been up to the last, I don't know, this year? Let's say that.
Oh man. Yeah. So I'm sitting here in my office. I'm over in Wyoming, Michigan, just opening up a practice. So that has been the primary busy item of the year. Yeah, I was just looking back on my calendar of when things have happened, or like even just like when
Yeah.
bills were paid for, different projects I've been working on. And I couldn't believe some of the things that felt like last year were like 3 months ago.
Okay. Wow.
Well, it's one of those where I'm like,
Yeah.
wow, I knew I was busy, but I didn't know it. I was like mentally squeezing so much in. I'm here over, yeah, Wyoming, Michigan. It's just south of Grand Rapids. It's kind of like Granville, Wyoming, Byron Center. We're all kind of in the same area,
Right.
just south of Grand Rapids. So yeah, I decided to launch my own practice. Been looking into that for years, 2, 3 years, and finally decided to pull the trigger. So I was
Okay.
evaluating the practice where I still operate. I still do surgery over in Ionia, Michigan, with another practice, and yeah, so I'm still doing that, and that's supporting me starting the practice at the same time. So it's nice. I get to talk about it. I don't have to secretly, be like opening a practice, or even throughout the whole process, I was really transparent with my boss, Dr. Mike Floor, great guy.
Mhm.
I've been in the ophthalmology world practicing. He's a solo guy for like
Okay.
40 years, so he gets it. So that was nice.
Yeah.
Lots of hurdles of like, how do I handle this situation? How do I evaluate this? So that was one of the big ones. I was like, the stress of this, I figured, it'd be better to do it without it, trying to make it a secret at the same time.
Yeah.
Because people do that and it's understandable, but I'm outside of the territory and it's been kind of weird. Like, dare I say, I feel like there's kind of like a God component to things. I don't tend to use that too loosely, but I couldn't have made this scenario. It hasn't been simple, but it's been better than I could have made it. The fact that I get to keep operating while
That's probably not that common, right?
no. So I'm like doing 2 days a week out there. They kind of needed me less because they wanted to hire in an optometrist. So they kind of wanted me to be doing more part time. And I wanted to be doing part time. So it's just like win win. And then the timing worked out incredibly well. So it was kind of right when I was wanting to launch, they were wanting me to just focus on surgery so they could
Yeah.
control their overhead costs. So it's more of an eat what I kill scenario now.
Yep.
I've never been in that position before. That's kind of fun, which is inherently what I'm doing in my practice here, right? So
Yeah. Right.
it's kind of like like a little taste of
Whew.
when I have a lot of patient flow here, what I can picture. It's just kind of the motivations, I guess, will be very similar. It's like I gotta see patients, I gotta do surgery to pay the bills,
Yep.
and I have to produce for them to pay their bills and to pay me. So it's it's cool. That's the major update. What else is new? I think I've learned a lot more about what everything costs in my industry, and it's expensive.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I chose to work with a group. It's called Independent Practice Partners. I don't mind giving them a nice shameless plug. They just do ophthalmology currently. It's a group of roughly 4 or 5 ophthalmologists that have started their own solo practices years
Okay.
ago, like 20, I think 2012 to 2018, somewhere in that range,
Mhm.
most of them started. And they figured out a system for helping other people start their solo ophthalmology
Mhm.
practice. And they're philosophically in favor of more solo doctors being around, and I am as well, as one of my motivations. They've helped open, I think now they're up to, I think I was the 20th or the 21st solo ophthalmologist they've helped start. And that experience gave me a lot of confidence to pursue this, despite knowing, it's going to take time. It's going to be expensive, all that kind of stuff. Owning my own business was my own practice specifically was a big goal for me. And wanting to do that in a way where I knew I would succeed seemed like a smart move.
Yeah.
So I went with having like kind of some consultants on board, but it meant something that they weren't just like consultants.
Yeah.
It can be kind of a dirty word, in some ways, like the people that definitely collect fees and don't always provide value. They definitely collect fees, right? You don't want just an extra expense. You want a lot of value added. If you're going to work with somebody that's been nice, they provide a lot of value, a lot of experience, and just peace of mind.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of what you pay for those things.
Yeah, for sure. Like insurance, right? Like it's almost that startup insurance, sort of not a guarantee, but hey, if I want to up my chances, how do I spend some money to up my chances of success and not making some of those big mistakes? So that's huge.
Yeah. So I paid off my student loans earlier this year. I think we did a pod after that.
Yeah.
And that was key. I felt like I wanted to just I wanted to like lower my risk and my downside however I could. I mean, I'm willing to like go bankrupt and lose everything I have at this point in my life.
Yeah.
Practice.
There's no better time to start a business than, yeah.
Right. Yeah. What are like, so you have to think like what scenarios would that be? I mean, one would be like you just pick a terrible location or you can't operate, like you have a physical issue. That's where I have disability insurance to cover that side of it. If you don't insure your equipment and some of it breaks, that's another downside.
Yeah.
And then just not having enough runway. So not being well funded, not having the finances to get through a 6-month period of barely seeing anybody. Cover that by working for the other practice. That's an extra. I didn't think I was going to have that, honestly. I thought I was just going to have to move on. So having that gives me like a huge level up in terms of financial safety.
Yep.
And then I got a great banking situation. My loan is at a competitive rate. Bank of America has an amazing program for doctors starting up practices.
They do. And there is, I've talked to a guy from Bank of America. One of my clients bought his family practice and used Bank of America. And so I got to chat with that guy a little bit. And it seems a little bit unique for medical practice.
It's unique. Yeah, I went to Chase for a head-to-head and I bank with Chase. I really like Chase, and there's a local guy here in West Michigan who just does a fantastic job. Like I just talked to him recently. I was like, why do you do such a good job? Like you literally answer my phone calls whenever I call. You solve my problems, even if it's like a credit card. Like he doesn't get anything out of it, right? I was like, and what's your deal? Like, why do you do such a good job? And he's just like, well, I just like what I do and I want people to have a good experience. I was like, there's no angle here.
Yeah.
It's just a good job. I like this.
Interesting.
So I wanted to go give Chase, a shot, but they don't have a doctor program like that. I think Bank of America is kind of one of the only ones. It's commercial loans are at like 8-9% right now.
Yeah.
Bank of America was substantially less.
Nice.
To my surprise. So, there's lots of paperwork. You bought a home within the last year and a half, 2 years. Or you bought a property.
Yes.
Like, I mean, your circumstances were different on that one, but the paperwork involved, it's like, oh, just one more piece of paper. You have to go through the right, no matter what. But access to capital lowers the risk a lot.
Yeah.
So we've got that going too, and that was a connection through independent practice partners to know about that program. I don't know if I would have ended up finding it otherwise. It's amazing what you can potentially have missed. It could have been in a scenario where I am borrowing at 9%. It's like so easily, like I checked with some credit unions. You're like, those are usually the best rates. They want local business. Everybody I talked to said go with credit union, local Lake Michigan credit union, whatever.
Sure.
That's a popular one.
Yeah.
I heard that from multiple people. That was like the best advice. And you start to think, okay, I heard it from multiple people. They're doctors. That's how they finance their thing. And that would have been for the amount of money I'm borrowing over time, it would have
Oh yeah.
been, I don't know, $80,000 difference,
Sure.
maybe probably more.
Yeah.
So it's kind of mind blowing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Those are my thoughts. Those are like the risk things I've been thinking about. Just controlling those because otherwise you don't do stuff out of fear, right? And you have to jump in a little bit. You
Mm-hmm.
don't know, you don't know. There's a million things, a little problem here and there that pops up along the way. And
Mm-hmm.
you have to know that you're willing to deal with that kind of stuff to start your own business.
Yeah.
But it's usually bigger things that keep people from, and I really do think more doctors should be solo.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the reasons we're in kind of the lack of medical leadership position we're in right
Hmm.
now
Okay.
is because of the clock in, clock out doctor mentality we have
Hmm.
instead of ownership of the patient's experience,
Yeah.
not just from a customer standpoint, but actually like the quality of care.
Sure.
Uh, Starts to get dictated by non physicians.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it can
Yeah.
force the
So,
physicians to feel like I'm just here to do a job, right? Yeah.
and if they don't feel valued, like if they don't feel valued because they're equivalent to everybody else in the company, and it's not like they're not better. We're definitely not better.
Yeah.
But there's an authority there. There's like a leadership component because of the knowledge that you have.
Okay.
Like you're the one who, like, when you run like a risk scenario, like in a hospital setting, like why did this person get, like a UTI, and they keep track of these numbers.
Yeah.
The the buck stops with the doctor, right? Who gets sued? Like it's the doctor.
Right.
Most situations in
Yeah.
the operating room, you can even have, an anesthesiologist or a CRNA. But
Mm-hmm.
really, it really comes down to you as the surgeon, even if you're not running the anesthesia.
Yeah.
Um, so
Sure.
yeah. Anyways, well, if a doctor can kind of know the reasons they're not taking on the responsibility, they can cross off those fear factors that keep people from moving into their owning their own practice. And I think if you're willing to shoulder more responsibility, you end up with a lot more just job satisfaction.
Yeah. Yeah. Like you said, ownership,
Yeah.
value. Yeah. Yeah. That makes total sense. I can see your point of wanting to see more doctors in solo practice, and having that actual fiscal ownership and physical ownership affects ownership and everything else in the work you do. And that's great. What was it that you feel like made you finally pull the trigger? Because yeah, we've
Mhm.
talked about this for years and off and on, just depending what else was going on. And but I know it's kind of always been there. So now you're doing it. What was that tipping point for you, do you feel like?
Yeah. My story was sort of like weirdly back and forth. So I thought I was gonna maybe buy this other practice I'm still working for and doing surgery.
Yep.
And I'm not like spilling the tea or sharing any secret. These are like things that like Dr. Floor and his family, like they're like super open people as well. So it's been like a really nice combination of personalities in a lot of
Yep.
ways, actually. Um, so I thought I was going to buy the practice. We couldn't match up on price, like just making a deal happen.
Yep.
And so then it was like, well, I want to own a practice, and I can't own your practice, and I can't compete with you because I signed a non-compete, which is totally reasonable. I wouldn't want to, go into someone's backyard after they hired me anyways. I just don't wouldn't feel good about that.
Yeah.
So they were kind of just like, well, you're going to start your own practice, right? And I'm like, yeah. So I started doing that thinking, if I don't buy their practice, I got to kind of have some things going because it takes so long to get started just to open your doors.
Right.
3 months would be incredibly fast. Realistically, you're looking at 5 to 6,
Okay.
which is right where I'm at. I'm at about 5 from when I got the ball rolling.
Okay.
And so I started doing that, and then once I realized I wasn't going to buy their practice for sure, I was like, I got to go full steam ahead.
Oh, okay.
I've just been doing that since May, basically.
Yeah.
And it just kind of takes that period of time. And then during that period of time, they were kind of like, well, you can stay. We kind of like flip flop back and forth. And there was just some positive changes on some areas in the clinic that I was asking for that I didn't think would change. And then they did. And so there was a moment where I was like, maybe I should just stay. But I really, really wanted to own my own practice. And Dr. Floor is great. So he could just tell, and he was just like, you're not going to regret this, you know. So he was encouraging me to do that too.
Yeah.
Uh, and then he ended up medically retiring from the surgery component just like in the last few weeks. And so I'm kind of like meeting a need for the practice there. And so
Yeah.
this kind of like happened very organically
Yeah.
and just kind of staying open to like, I really appreciate my relationship with Dr. Floor and that practice. So I've wanted to like keep going there, and I love working with the staff. And I think it's like really good for me to work with staff and just keep practicing like how to manage. And right now I can practice managing there before I have my own staff here. I can keep my surgical skills up. So it's been like this really, I think that's probably true for everybody. Like from the outside, it's going to look like, oh, I decided to open a practice, and then boom, like I opened a practice, you know?
Yep.
And then probably in 2 years, it'll be like, oh, you got busy so fast. It must have been so easy. And even
Ha. And
I'll
you're just, yeah.
probably think it was easy. You know, a couple of years from now, I'll probably be like, oh, you should open a practice. It's no big deal. If I
Yeah.
can do it, you can do it.
Yeah.
Like, remind me not to say that later because it's actually extremely hard and
Yeah.
very tiring and stressful.
Yeah.
But it's good. Like it's definitely worth it. And putting a good team together is the key. And fortunately, for ophthalmologists, I would say go with IPP. I mean, they're a great group. There's got to be other equivalents for other
Sure.
fields.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Like I didn't have to put a team together. I hired this team that already existed,
Right.
and I had to like join the team, but I still own my own practice, and they're teaching me how to build my own team. So
Yeah.
it's
Fantastic.
very much like I'm not trying to do it all on my own. I could not do this all on my own for sure. They answer questions for me constantly.
Yep.
Every little, there's just so many details, right? So
Hmm.
that would
And
be
that's
my
great.
advice.
Yeah. That's huge. I bet there's more in the family practice, primary care, pediatrics, like those kind of ones that you see quite often. And
Yeah.
ophthalmology is there for sure as far as one that's commonly um, independent practice. But yeah, I'm sure the other specialties have those as well. How'd you hear about them?
That was like 2020, right after COVID. I was looking for a new job. I was between jobs
Hmm.
and was like, okay, I have not a lot of experience. I probably don't want to be starting a practice in the middle of like COVID just kicking off. But I was trying to figure out what that would look like and reading books about it. And I had like all my student loans still. So I was just like, I definitely can't do this right now. So I kind of scrambled into another position. But while I was looking, there's this website. I think one of my friends told me about it. One of my friends from residency called the Solo Building Blog.
Okay.
And um, a couple guys worked on it, but I think it was mostly the brainchild of Ho Sun Choi, who started up Independent Practice Partners. So he
Okay.
graduated residency, and even as far as I understand it, and a lot of this is from his blog rather than just talking to him directly, but he couldn't find a job he really liked that he thought was favorable, where like his skills and thoughts and drive was going to be rewarded. And he couldn't find a spot where he was going to work for somebody that would reasonably let him buy in or buy them out. So
Yep.
he ran all the numbers and he was like, it's worth it for me to start my own practice. So straight out of residency, he just kind of bootstrapped his way into starting his own practice from
Yeah.
scratch, like without a lot of what sounds like without a lot of help, other than not like he didn't have help. Like I know his family was part of it. There's a number of components, but like he didn't have a service like what he built.
You're right.
And from that, he blogged about it a lot. And then other solo doctors, they kind of formed like this little club of like solo doctors, and you could pay
Right.
a one-time fee, and then you'd be in this big email group, and people talk about what do you buy and where do you
Almost
get
like a
it from?
mastermind group sort of thing or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Like exactly like that.
Okay.
So that organically grew. And then I think there was probably some organic demand for, hey, I want to do a solo practice like you. Can you help me do that? And
Yep.
then time they made it more official.
Hmm. That's
It's pretty
great.
cool. I mean, if
Yeah.
you that's the advantage of if you're just savvy enough to like form a community online,
Yeah.
and you're meeting an organic need, people are pounding on your door asking for you to provide a service. That's like the perfect time to start a business. You don't
Yeah. Right.
have to
Exactly.
worry about creating customers. The customers are asking you to create the service. So
Yeah.
I'm glad he did it because I don't know. I think I would have gotten here eventually, but it could have been, I don't know, 2 years, 4 years, 10 years, maybe
Uh,
another practice
yeah.
where I couldn't really have a voice on how things were done. And
Right.
that's really hard to find. Like
Yeah.
I was looking at one practice where I respected all the ophthalmologists there.
Right.
But I thought, one guy said I might slow down in 5 years, which is code for I might slow down in 10 to 15 years.
Right. But probably won't. Yeah. That's, man.
Yeah.
Similar thing in
And
our business. I got
yeah,
into this
I
business
bet.
was kind of sold on the idea, hey, the average advisor is 57. There's gonna be a ton retiring. There's gonna be all sorts of opportunity
Yep.
to buy,
Yep.
firms and buy books of business and stuff. And just wasn't the case. Because when I
Right.
started, I found out like, you can do this into your 70s if you wanted to, and you're
Right.
healthy. And they did.
Why wouldn't you?
And it's not a super intense business. Once you get this kind of select group of clients, you find that these old advisors just kind of, work 2 or 3 days a week, make decent money. And it's like, why would they retire? I get it. They've got
Right.
the schedule they want, the lifestyle they want, money's
Right.
good. So it was just like, man, I can't be waiting around anymore for
Right.
somebody to kick it. I gotta start
Right.
out on my own. But yeah, so totally.
Yeah. So that was a big motivator for me, was like wanting to have an influence on how things are done, even just like how money is spent and what equipment is purchased and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
And it's funny because like you start to do it yourself, and everybody who's been in business for like, 20 years plus, like one generation of time, like
Yep.
well, totally gets this. But like as soon as I started buying stuff, I was like, oh, now I kind of get it. Like now I now I understand why they said that. Like before I was like,
Um,
that doesn't make sense to me. I think we should do it this way. You like start to do it and you're like, oh, I get it. It's nice. It's humbling.
yeah, it's well, kind of like
Good.
my daughter, graduating from high school and getting out into the real world now, and she's
Yeah.
working a couple jobs and going to
Hmm.
community college. And I feel like her and my relationship has gotten better. Like she seems to be taking my advice sometimes, and she's just a little more got some common sense on life. It's pretty great.
Hmm. Yeah. There's just nothing like experience.
Totally. Way to fast track it, man. That's super exciting. Man, I've been excited to watch you and super proud of taking that leap. And glad we're able to catch you kind of at the beginning phases of this, but obviously
Yeah.
there's been already some work and planning that's gone into it. I talk to residents from time to time who are like, I'm going to get out of residency and start my own practice and stuff. And it's like, I still have yet to see somebody do it. So
Yeah.
that's cool. You're saying about Dr. Choi and seeing somebody do that and help
Mhm.
others.
Yep.
Do you feel like there's a certain type of people that should own their own practice and some that shouldn't? Like, what do you feel like is that differentiator?
It's a good question. I think I'm pretty practical about it. I'd say like if you don't have a lot of equipment you'd have to buy, I saw my internal medicine doctor today. Man, I wish I was an internal med doctor because like the startup cost would be so much lower. I have a friend who's a rheumatologist and another guy who's like a sleep medicine doctor. I'm like, man, sleep medicine, you could just make so much money doing a sleep because those book out pretty far. There's only so many in town. Like you could be one of the big sleep centers without a ton of effort just because of demand.
Right.
And he's like, yeah, there's, it's a big thing. Like, yeah, right. You don't know what you don't know. It'd be a lot of work. It took me, a year, 2, 3 years and getting in a different financial position to pull the trigger. But it would be successful for sure, right? So like should he do it? Like he would have to want to, and then it's risk, right? I mean, I think that's what people are always deciding is like, oh, that sounds scary, or just the perceived the effort or the time. But you've got, on the one hand, I've got a friend, rheumatologist. The other one's like a sleep doctor. Like the sleep medicine one, if you did the clinic and everything, that's a lot of capital outlay, right?
Yeah.
That's a bunch of money. But if you're a
Yeah.
rheumatologist or internal medicine, like you could start up a clinic like just so easily without a lot of money.
Yeah.
You could read like a couple books on business startup. There's The Medical Entrepreneur is like a pretty easy one.
Okay.
You could start a practice without, I mean, for like under 100 grand if you're an
Yeah,
internal
sure.
um, and immediately have all the freedom to be on vacation as much as you want to. It's more responsibility, but it's still like freedom and responsibility go together. I feel like those can be considered like opposite ends of a spectrum,
Yeah.
but they're like they go together. Like you for by taking on responsibility, you get the privilege of more freedom. But yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say. I think you just have to really want to do it.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Um, or you have to really not want to do the way things are done. And
Gotcha.
I feel like the people who start practices now, because it's, I don't know why, but perceived to be very difficult to be successful. I don't think that's true. I think it just takes time. I think it
Yeah.
just patience. I think
Yeah.
if you start your own practice, you like, it's almost an inevitability that you'll do well if you're a good doctor because there's so much demand.
Yeah.
But
Hmm.
yeah, I was motivated by both. Like I didn't like the
Both.
way
Yeah. That's a good point.
like the private equity world is going with
Yeah.
ophthalmology. And I
Okay.
do like the idea of having my own thing.
Hmm.
So
Now, are you talk about private equity, we see that all the time. Private equity is buying up practices. Um, how do you avoid that? If everybody or a lot of other practices are going that way, there must be a reason, there must be something to it, but you don't like that, philosophically, like what, when you think down the road, that's obviously going to be a temptation at some point, right?
I don't think so. I have thought about that. Like if somebody came in and wanted to write me a check or whatever, what would it have to be? And I was like, I just don't think I would want to do it.
Yeah.
Not like there's no amount of money, but there's no realistic amount of money. Like
Right.
it, everything comes at a cost, right? No one's going to give you something for nothing.
Yeah.
So there's always a trade-off. It's going to be you're committing to something. Do you want to be an employee or not? I mean, it's like the real question. I
Well,
don't
yeah.
being an employee, but I the there's just so many better things about not being an employee and owning your own business. Like you being the one who owns the business gives you all these like tax privileges. Just that alone
That,
is like,
yeah.
why would you give that up? I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think I would. That's part of the reason these guys uh don't want to sell their practices. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just
Sure.
you really do kind of have to get a decent chunk of change to want to give up all those benefits. Um,
Right.
so unless you want to be retired, like
Yeah.
why would you sell for less than a lot? You
Yeah.
wouldn't. So it's not like I don't understand. It's just for me, who's someone who's willing to open their own practice and take the time and some
Yep.
losses up front. Like my apples to apples of buying the practice versus starting my own.
Yep.
A lot of other people's apples to apples is taking a salary somewhere else or buying this practice, buying
Yep.
themselves a job.
Okay.
Like, why would I buy myself a job when I can borrow myself into owning a company? And
Yeah,
that's what I,
totally.
right?
Yep.
So it makes a lot more sense where I'm at and with what I know and understand about taxes and business. The numbers are like, it's not even close. It's like you want to own your own thing. You want to be able
Yep.
to depreciate. Um, you want to be able to pay yourself in a couple different ways, maybe with an S corp. People argue about whether that's worth doing or not, but that's just a tiny piece of the pie. Like you just you are treated better, owning your own company by the IRS.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I actually had a couple times now where I've had one of our physicians come to me in a meeting and say, "Hey, I've got this job," and they're offering me either W-2 or 1099. Which one should I go with? It's like,
Mhm.
oh gosh, 100%, you know,
Yeah.
it's even close.
Yeah.
And that's worked out well because, you know, I've talked about this couple before where they worked it out just right. They're both anesthesiologists. One of them was W-2. The other one, I said, let's take the 1099. And basically, if we do this
Hmm.
right, we can live off his salary and bank hers pre-tax. You know, so we set up this solo 401k and we set up the cash
Mhm.
balance plan and the, you
Yeah.
know,
That's perfect.
defined contribution and all that stuff, defined benefit plan. Like it was, yeah, I've never had a client put away that much for retirement pre-tax on an annual, like over a
Yeah.
period of a few years because of that. Now, granted, they're very disciplined and smart. Not all
Mhm.
my clients are that way,
Mhm.
but
That's
that
a
was a good
great combo.
opportunity. What's
Yeah.
that?
That's an amazing combo. Like, I feel like the best thing you can do is like, I'm gonna have 1099 slash business ownership. If I could combo up with somebody like a nice like state government employee who's W,
Right?
because you know that like the Michigan state benefits are like insane, right? The state
Yeah.
employees, like their health insurance is like
Right.
insane.
Yeah.
So like the coverage levels are just nuts.
Yep.
So yeah, like it's a nice if you can get the best of both worlds on that.
Or like a teacher or something. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. There's
Yeah.
a ton of perks. That's kind of underrated. I mean, teachers are underpaid, obviously, but their benefits are like
I've
actually
seen
worth
them.
something.
Yeah. My wife used to work for the school districts doing health insurance, and she was like, I mean, it is the top tier. Like,
Yeah.
I've never seen any better
They
benefits.
don't pay anything.
No,
It's
like you want a massage every week? Go for it. Get covered.
right.
Yeah. So again, they're worth it. We obviously don't pay them enough. Glad they have benefits, but lesson is marry a teacher,
That's right.
especially
They
if you're an independent contractor. And then like this couple too, you know, because they were able to, you know. Meanwhile, the husband's maxing out his 401k at work, you
Mhm.
know, so it's like all that stuff combined. So yeah, that totally makes sense there. In fact, we had when I was in Grand Rapids this week for our financial advisor association, we have a lobbyist come in every year and just kind of tell us, hey, what's going on? Um, Here's what's up, you know, at the Capitol and different things that they're talking about and bills that are coming up. And one of them, like some other states have talked about, I think some have passed, started with Uber and Lyft trying to get these independent contractors, gig workers to go W-2, because I think we had this giant
Mhm.
chunk of the population that thought, oh, they are making so much money, these companies, they should
Mhm.
be paying my employment taxes and give me
Right.
benefits and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, no, what you have as independent contractors, the ability to now work for anybody, do both Uber and Lyft, like, you know, and then you basically get to write off so much, you know, just all that kind of thing that they're probably not totally thinking through. But now one of the laws in Michigan that they're talking about, I don't know how far it's gone, but, you know, trying to do away with the independent contractor concept for many industries. And I just don't get it. But unless we're talking strictly a play of getting more revenue into the state, I get that. But other than that, it's like, man, who would be on board for that?
Yeah, it sounds good to say like people should get more benefits, but
Well,
unfortunately,
sure. Yeah.
the question is like, yeah, it's what's better for the individual, for the worker is not typically what's asked. It's sort of like what sounds good. And it sounds good to say like, let's get these people benefits that benefits
Yeah.
the politicians. So that I think that's where that comes from, because if you, as we were just saying, if you run the numbers, they're better off just managing their own finances.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yep.
but that can be complicated, and not everybody wants to do that. Probably
No.
the majority don't want to have to think about
Yeah.
how their money is spent. They just want to have access to health care and a car and food and shelter and some fun money. And they don't want to run their own budget. So
Yeah.
that's a healing concept, the we'll take care of you concept of the government.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah. Which works really great until the government doesn't take care of you anymore.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's another conversation for another episode.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that. We should go into some political science
Right.
examples.
Yeah. Some economics. Yeah. That sounds
Yeah.
good.
Bring out some
Well,
Milton Friedman and yeah.
yeah. Some Rothbard. We can get into some Austrian economics.
Mm.
That's also known as real economics, if you will.
Okay.
Yeah, for another time.
So good. So life is good. You're on track. You're moving along.
It's
Anything else
good.
new and exciting? What's happening in the cryptocurrency world? Any
Oh,
commentaries for us?
thankfully, nothing. No commentary necessary. Everything is quiet and less people are being scammed, which is great.
Yeah.
So I'll just continue to say Bitcoin is great. It's a real commodity. It's still um, it's still regulated by the CFTC. There might be a spot ETF approved maybe someday in the next few months or in the next couple of years, or nobody really knows, and people like to speculate on that. But Bitcoin is a real asset. You can actually store yourself,
Mhm.
and everything else in that space is pretty centralized, um,
Yeah.
scammy, and it's manipulatable. I mean, what's the
Mhm.
point? US dollar is already manipulated, and we use that. I feel like that's enough currencies for me that I use that are manipulated. I don't need to do any others.
Mm. Yeah. Well said.
just, just that one's fine, and I'm grateful we have access to US dollar. I'm very grateful for it. So
Yeah, definitely.
Bitcoin is better technology. And that's
Yeah.
all. Yeah.
Good.
There you
Well,
go. That's the shortest I've ever been on the topic.
yeah, it is really. I know. Wow. Geez. Now I don't I've got all this time to kill now. Um,
I
well,
have one other thought on
yeah.
the practice thing because this was a major motivator, and it should be the motivator. This is the reason I want a lot of my friends to open their own medical practices, solo or otherwise,
Yep.
because we are the thing, not just doctors. I'm nurse practitioners. I'm not being exclusionary or elitist. All of the providers, anybody who can bill, create value, right? We're the ones who actually like make the service happen. We're the ones that we bill the insurance company or the individual, even take them out of it. Like I do an eye surgery, I provided that for the patient. You know, if we're in Mexico, they pay me cash maybe as in the privatized scenario.
Yep.
It's a transaction, right?
Hmm.
And when you work for somebody else, you do not get to retain that value. So you are giving that value away. And then when you give away your own value, you also give away your voice. So that's like that's why I was kind of just lightly saying before why I think we should have more doctors being independent is we can't really we can't really say from a strong standpoint, we can't argue well and with
Yeah.
authority if we don't control our own value. So it's totally worth it. I will actually make more money doing it this way.
Yeah.
It's more risk, but I can control my overhead. Like the
Hmm.
actual gross revenue, the amount of money that I create as an individual business,
Yep.
as a physician, that money, that pool of money, I can decide how much do I want to spend and how do I want to use it and how many employees do I want to have.
Yep.
Um, we get like extracted from that if you're employed at a hospital or in other scenarios.
Yeah.
And I think when you get separated from your own value, you also get separated from your money. Like people take it.
Yep.
And I don't think that's right. I don't think that's right in any business scenario. If you're the one creating the value, if you're a manufacturer, um, you don't want to charge if it costs you $5 to make something and then you're going to sell it to somebody else for 10 and
Yep.
they're going to resell it on Amazon for 100.
Yeah.
It's like sell it on Amazon for 100
Right.
yourself. You
Right.
know, I
Totally.
just I just don't like that. So that that has appealed to me to the degree that I decided to spend a lot of my time and energy on opening my own practice. That was one of the primary drivers.
Sure.
It just feels like the
Mm.
right thing to do with the
Yep.
gift and knowledge that I've been given.
Yeah.
And so I want other people to do the same thing for their own benefit. They could keep all the extra money, they can give it away, they can make a difference in the world. Like, I just think if you're creating value, you should go the extra 5 to 10%, especially if you can do it all up front, like I am. That
Yep.
extra time, this 1 or 2 years, do it all up front, and I will take home a lot more value that I can use to change the world in
Yep.
whatever way I think is best. And I want other people to be able to do that. I want to empower other people to do that, just like Independent Practice Partners has for me. So that's I didn't mention that component, but that's a big motivator. So I want to
Yeah.
sneak that.
No, that makes total sense. And I think that's a good wrap up, and to kind of add just a final piece of why that can make sense for a lot of people, and some of the good, like you said, money, sure. But so many other ancillary factors that come out of that make it
Mhm.
worth considering.
Exactly.
And I'm obviously a big proponent of that as well. This is, you and I are in a similar position of kind of owning our stuff and what we do
Mhm.
and having the control over it. And it's hard work, and there's some risks and decisions to be made and costs to be had, but
Yeah,
um, I don't regret it at
it's
all.
worth it. It's worth it.
Yep.
More gratifying when you take on more responsibility.
And and I don't know if everybody's wired that way, but I think you and I certainly are. But
You're right. You're right.
seems like a no-brainer. But
Mhm.
well, cool. Well, I think that's all the time we have for today, which is great. I love it when you and I start a conversation. We managed to fill enough of an episode for
Yeah.
make it worthwhile to publish. So yeah, we'll guys be sure we'll be back one way or another in a couple of weeks as we get the next episode and continue rolling on our next topic. We're getting to the end of the year, so we're going to have some topics coming out that are timely, that you want to make sure you catch. So make sure you're following or subscribing here. Please, I know every podcast asks this, but certainly leave a review so that, number one, that this show comes up when people search for this, because if you feel like this information is valuable, other physicians need to hear this, then your rating and review are going to help spread that word. So do a good thing for your fellow physician. Share this, leave a rating and a review, and then hop on over to our other social media places and post and share there. We've got our TikToks that are cranking out. We try to just get some shit out on a regular basis, whether it's clips of this or other stuff that I throw up on the camera. Instagram, our Twitter and financial and Facebook are going on. So please get there. Help spread the word if you like it. If you don't like it, tell us. Somehow we love to hear what's going on. And until next time, Dr. Smith, good to see you, buddy.
You too. Thanks, John.
Yep. This is John Salitra with the Financial MD Show. We will see you next time.